All right, let's get started. My name is John Klubnik. This is our Speed Dating with ACT, 10 tips in an hour, and it is right at 2:02, so we'll go probably a little less than an hour. Like I said, I've shortened this from earlier versions, but I just took some of the things that most likely either things that weren't totally obvious to people or things that we train on a lot that they may want to hear or see. And then, like I said, I've got 2 or 3 versions of this, and I'm always building. So you're going to get a survey at the end of our call, and one of the questions is what other things would you like to see me roll into these? By far, this has been the most popular webinar that we've done. Other ones, what's new in ACT and how to what's doing this version, that kind of stuff, not as popular. So hope you like it, and let's get started. So our first one today is the ID status, or I call it buckets for your ACT data. And let me tell you why I say that. So you think about ACT being a sales database. Now, on one end of the spectrum, we could just be a Rolodex. And so a Rolodex, what do we have? We've got name, address, phone number, city, state, zip. And that's about it. Stuff you can get off the phone book or the web, but there's nothing to categorize or prioritize your information. And so you can do this with a multiplicity of fields, but in ACT, the most logical one to do this in is called the ID status field. And so I wanted to show you this and basically encourage you or suggest that you work through your ACT database, that you think about this and how you might customize this. So remember that a salesperson, when they're calling or when somebody calls you, you've got one chance to stick your head into that company and see what's going on. And the information that you gather at that time is going to be the information that you wish you'd gathered later, and so you want to make sure that you gather the right bits of info. So let me flip over. Here's my screen right now. So this right now, this down arrow here is just the ID status, and you can see this is what's called a multi-select drop-down, meaning I can be a customer, a contractor, distributor, and a friend, so on, all these things. I can go and change the values, and so if I want to say, there's lead, I've got prospect. Let's say I don't really want to keep manufacturer, I can delete that one, and maybe I want to keep my church folks here, so I might just add one for church. A lot of folks, they'll actually come to us and they'll say, hey, I need a database for church, a database for this business, a database for that business, a database for my kid's school, and really you don't, because you can use this field to separate the database into different chunks. And so if Chris Huffman, let's just find Melissa here. So if I go look up and just type in Mel, I'm going to find Melissa Pearson, Melissa Weather. Let's say Melissa Weather is in my church group. I can just go down here and say church. And then if I want to find everybody that's in church, all I've got to do is right click, look up ID status, say contains church, click OK, and there they all are. So it's real easy to find them, and because of that, I don't have to have a different database for everything I do. So when I say buckets in terms of this this bucket list, or buckets for your data, buckets are the bits of information that you want to capture. And so, for example, you might have a bucket for industry somebody is in, industry for a bucket for product line that somebody's interested in with you. I have a bucket for relative temperature, for example, hot, warm, cold, or gold, silver, and dross. Remember, dross is that crud that floats to the top when you purify silver or gold. And so a gold might be a top-level customer, silver might be so-so, and dross is the guys that we're going to try to get off the phone with as quickly as we can. They're of no value to us. Now, I do keep those in the database, and so sometimes if they call back, I'll know them ahead of time. I had somebody call the other day, and I hadn't talked to them about 8 years, and they worked for a different company, but we knew right away where we left off, what we'd done, information about their company, who they reported to, all this stuff, because it was kept inside of ACT. So tip number 1 is just use or define buckets, and buckets are the questions that you wish you would ask, and that might be a custom field or some custom drop downs, but Remember that when your salespeople call or when you talk on the phone, you have one chance to get all the information or the best information that you can out of that phone call. And we use that with different fields, and I call those buckets. What we don't want to do is go in and journal about it. So people would typically open a note and they'll just basically journal, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So that's our first tip, buckets for your ACT data. Second one, notes, histories, what to use and when and where. Notes, activities, histories, and this kind of alludes to what I was just talking about. So a lot of folks, here's what they do. When Melissa calls, they go and they open a note and they journal. Melissa called. She's interested in buying from us next spring. She'd like to call us, like us to call her next Tuesday. She's very interested in our product. And people will journal on and on and on and on and on. And they're basically, they've moved the database from what was just a Rolodex to now a journal. The problem with the journal is we're not using those buckets that we talked about. It's hard to search, it's hard to report on, and it's hard, the more people and the more context you have, it's hard to go back and see what's been going on. So in terms of what do I use a note for? Okay, we don't use it to record phone calls. We don't use it to journal about what's going on. Notes are primarily good for background information. You might say, Melissa works half a day on Fridays and she loves Texas barbecue. Okay, that's background information. You can put communication style. Maybe they're colloquial in their speaking. Maybe they want you to get to the point. Different things like that. We also use this sometimes for inter-team communication. So if I'm going to write a note about somebody or kind of describe something, and the goal here is we're keeping these kind of short. We put serial numbers there. I put, just things like that. That's a good place for that. Now, histories are business communications, business contacts. And to answer your question, Lynn, this is the desktop version, but this is all the same things in both versions. But histories are going to be things, and I'll try to make a distinction between what version we're on. I'm on the desktop right now, and so if I wanted to record that I had a history with Melissa, I could click on the history button at the top. That works in both desktop and web. Desktop version has an option to do a Control-H, and you see this brings up my history box. This is where you want to go to put information about Melissa called, I called her, I left a message, we had a meeting, we had to-dos scheduled, all sorts of stuff you can do here. So I can say what type of activity this was, and these are customizable. You can add to it, sales call or something like that. But in this case, I might say this was a phone call, the call was completed. What did we talk about? I can either type it in or select from the drop-down. If you want to attach a file, you can attach a document or a PDF if there was something about that. And then down below you have details you can write. And you see it timestamps the current date and time. Now, you can certainly on a Sunday night go in here and record all your calls for the week. So I click here and I go back a few days and record that this was the 16th of 2 o'clock, and maybe it wasn't 2 o'clock, but it was 12:30, let's do a PM. So ACT has the flexibility of allowing you to backfill opportunities. Now the cool thing about this is you put this in and now it shows up on my history. Now you can see there's different things here. I've got email sent, I've got call completed. I can actually now go into my field types and say, I just want to see activity histories. So now we're just looking at the calls that were made. So when Melissa calls me, here's what I do. I scroll through my notes and see what background information is there. Hey, she loves Texas barbecue, so maybe I'll suggest doing that. Under histories, I can see when we talked last or how many times we've talked or how many meetings that we have had. Now, activities is the third thing in this, and this is things that go on my calendar. So in terms of my phone call here with Melissa, first thing I did is I checked my notes. I recorded the phone call, and she might say, hey, why don't we get together for lunch next Friday? In that case, I can go up here and select meeting. I can choose from the drop down next Friday the 2nd. We can say this is going to go from 11 to 12:30, and we'll call this barbecue lunch because that's what she likes. And you see what this does, this goes to my activity tab. Now here's the difference between the three. Activities, as far as ACT is concerned, are things that are scheduled to be done but have not yet been done. So this is going to go on my calendar where I can actually go and let's say we go to view and calendar and we look at the work week calendar, and let's go look at the second. See right there, there's my calendar, and I guess you move it around here if I want to. I can right click and go back to the contact here if I want to. Or I just go back and click on contacts again and it takes me right back. But activities or calendar items, they also show up in the task list. So if I go to view or I click on the left-hand side to my task list, I'm a hard time with that sticking right now, but we'll come back and there we go. There's my task list, and I can say, hey, let's look at the task list for next week or in the future, and it would show up there. So you see I've got a lot of other tasks that are on this database, just as an example. Typically you would do this maybe for the current day or for today. You'd see that there. An activity, when it's cleared, so once I've done it, I clear it, that means that I mark it as done, and then it goes to my history. So now you see there's my barbecue lunch for demo. It's now a history instead of an activity. And what that means is that's going to show up on my history reports. So my second tip today was what's the difference between notes, activities, history, what to use and where. So notes for background information, for team communication, we don't use them to journal. Histories record business communications. Activities are things that we have scheduled to be done that we have not yet done. You can send a meeting invitation from here, and it's when you go to your call meeting here, there's a send invitation email checkbox right there that you can send those as well. All right, there's that question. Let's go on to our next one. Okay, so next we got into just things that I see people have sometimes, and we just kind of wonder, well, how'd they get there, and what am I going to do about that? So this one is removing blank contacts and why they occur. So we'll go back here. So a blank contact happens if I were to go right-click and choose New Contact, and then go, oh, I don't need that, and I just go do something else. Let's look at Melissa again. And so it lets me do that. Now, if you have required fields in your database, it'll holler at you. You'll get a warning, and you'll be stuck there. But otherwise, I just made one. Another way to make a blank contact is to press the insert key. And so you find the insert key on your keyboard, and there it is. So now I've got two blank contact records. Now, why are they there? 100% human error. So now with that, I want to show you something else. So number one, we want to kind of minimize that. Now it's easy to find them because I'm just going to go, for example, there's a field called Create Date. It's on the Contact Access tab, and you see right here, I can right click, I can say Create Date, and I see every record's going to have Create Date. Let's find another one. Well, another way to see how they're there is you go to the list view, and you do look up all contacts, and you sort. So there's my two blank records at the top. Now to get rid of them, you can put it in the tag mode. Just click on these two, and then you can go to the contact menu and choose delete contact. Now, one of the tricks I built into this is if ever you choose delete contact, it's going to warn you. You're deleting two contacts. So look and see, did I select two contacts? Watch this. If I had done tag all, and I go to contact and delete, now it says, hey, you're deleting 203 contacts. So if you say yes here, they're gone, there's no undo, they don't come back. So always make sure and preview before you start. I'm going to untag all. I'm going to go back and select my two blank ones, And now when I go, there's 3 ways to delete. You can go to contact menu and delete. You can right click and delete, or control delete on the keyboard. And it warns you, deleting contacts can't be undone. Are you sure you want to do it? You say yes. It tells you again. Remember, there's no undo. So read the warning messages. And there you go. So here's a question: how do you prevent blanks? So I can prevent blanks by going to Tools and define fields, and I can say that a contact field must be filled out. So for example, city field, edit, and I can deselect the box that says allow blank. The problem with that is if you wanted to allow, it's a field by field, not a record by record thing. So one blank, one required field really would stop you from getting blank records at all. The problem with the blank, with a required field, is you have to fill it out. And so if you want to do that, then that's something else. Now here's another trick with this, and this really is something else we see a lot of times. If I go to look up in my record, I'm logged into this database as Chris Huffman, okay? And if I go to histories, you can see the record manager for all these phone calls and meetings is Chris Huffman. Let me show you what happens sometimes. I'm going to copy the word Chris Huffman and just put in Betty Boop. Watch what happens when I hit save. All the histories all the way down that used to belong to Chris Huffman now belong to Betty Boop. Now here's what gets confusing. Sometimes people will look at this database and they think, hey, I don't need to be in the database. I'm user, I'm not a customer, and they'll overwrite their contact info and put a customer's info, just like I did, replacing Chris Huffman with Betty Boop. And then they'll call me and they'll say, we've been hacked. Betty Boop got into our database and has been calling our customers. And don't laugh, it's happened a lot. Okay, so it's just because the my record is a record for sender information. It's your record, and your stuff goes there. And so if I go back here and put Chris Huffman back in and hit save, watch this column again, click all the way down, it's fixed. So that's a bonus tip for you. ACT and Outlook email. Let me tell you how the two of these go together, and I did not set this up for my demo today. So let me describe to you and also tell you some stuff that's coming in brand new. You would need to have Outlook set up first of all. So if you go in, I don't think I did in here. So Outlook has to be set up, sending and receiving emails. And then to set this up, we go to the Tools menu and down to Preferences. Let's see if I get a new wizard or not. Yeah, it is working. Okay. So this is only going to work once you have Outlook already configured. And then the next thing, while that's starting up, you would go to Tools and down to Preferences and over to Email and Outlook. And let me tell you what these two things mean here. There's two sides of the screen, a top and a bottom. When people think Outlook, they think contacts and calendar and emails and things like that, invitations and stuff. So to comment to Lynn's comment, they are rebuilding this, and it is expected to be released in 20.1, and we'll see if it's better. It's been a bit problematic, and more so recently because Microsoft, as they've released Office 365, has released just lots and lots of different builds, and half of them have broken things in ACT. And so if you're an Office 365 user, there's a way to not get every new build that they do and just get builds less frequently, and that will increase the likelihood that your Outlook integration breaks. But it is also the #1 support issue that ACT is getting, and which is why they're redoing it. So just let me show you how this works, and I agree it's an area that has some difficulties. Okay, so back here for setting up email histories. it's the top section. So I would go to email setup, and I would be able to choose Outlook. If you don't see Outlook here, it's because you've got the wrong version of Outlook installed or Outlook is not installed. I would not use the ACT email client or internet mail. They create more mess than they're worth. So we pick Outlook. The next thing we do is we go hit next, and it's asking me, I need to set up an address book. I say yes. Now, this part right here, this dialog box shows itself in ACT a few different ways. And you'll also get a message that says your address book has not been set up, yes or no. And I got people, and you may be this guy, but they keep hitting no and no and no and no and no, and they don't know what to do with it. I'll tell you this, if you say yes, it will take you to this screen, and here's all you do. You hit add, and it basically reads the current database that you're in. If you've got a password, you put it in, and you click OK. And it tells you this is going to take place next time you start Outlook. And it should fill out your information. That's all you have to do. Now, if there's one here, you can remove it. I have to close this and get back in, but you can remove it and enter it again. But that one error, your address book has not been set up yet, what do you want to do, really confuses a lot of folks. So if it says that to you, just say yes and continue. The next screen here is what you can use for my email editor, and I would again choose Outlook. The ACT email editor is rather primitive, and there's not a lot of reasons to use it. So choose Outlook for that. And I do another webinar on marketing with ACT, and we look at Swift Page, email marketing, ACT mail marketing, MailChimp. We look at sending it through different add-on tools. We look at other things. So that's another one that we do. So I'm just kind of hitting the surface on this. Okay, the next button here says what type of history do you want to make? So if you expect ACT to make a history, you need to choose something here. Now there's two options. What this does is this controls the default. So when you send an email, there's a default of the type of history that will be made inside of ACT. So if you say none, that means you have to make ACT work. You have to basically tell that particular email to attach. And the default is that no email gets attached. On the other hand, if you pick this one and you've got a very sensitive email that you don't want attached or a personal email you don't want attached, you would have to change within the email what that is. So this is basically just changing the default for your emails going out. All right, we'll go on. There's an option to make them private. So the next thing is what type of history. When you have an incoming message, you can choose that here, and that's done by clicking a button inside of Outlook. You can choose to eliminate My Records from the history. ACT is making a history based upon a matching email address. So if I send an email from Outlook and there is a matching email address in ACT, it attaches it. If I initiate the send from ACT, it attaches it to the current record based on a matching email address. If I have a bunch of incoming emails inside of Outlook, I can click the Attach to ACT button. It searches for the incoming or the matching email address and attaches. That's how it's supposed to work there. As far as alarms, you can choose where these control, and this I think goes back to our question we had up here a little bit. On meeting invitations, can you be seen at the same time you schedule a meeting? I'm not sure. The invitation goes out via email, and there's a way in a meeting to schedule an invite. Let me tell you something. One of the questions here was, hey, this thing doesn't really work so great all the time. I'm hopeful that they get this working really well and predictably. I still send Outlook messages, and I just enter it in ACT when I need to. So there's different types of results that people get, but the option here says, do I want my alarm to fire inside of ACT, inside of Outlook, or both? And the most reliable option here is Outlook. The other ones can have issues. And that's setting up down that. Now the bottom option is basically synchronization. So remember, there's three ways we could integrate with ACT and Outlook. One is the emails. That's the top half of the section of the page. and then the bottom half is contacts and calendar. And about 2 versions ago, they added the ability to sync one way, which I really recommend. So if I want to take my contacts, I can push these to Outlook, and I think, as I haven't closed Outlook yet, they're not there, but you can choose this drop-down menu an option to sync one way. There you go, one way ACT to Outlook. There's not an Outlook to ACT one way. It's a one-way ACT to Outlook or a two-way. The downside of doing it 2 ways is if you've got personal stuff inside of Outlook that you don't want in ACT, it all shows up. And then number 2, if it breaks, it makes duplicates, which are hard to clean up. So I can pick here a criteria. I can define a sync set. And then it'll ask you, do you want to sync between ACT and Outlook? And you can say yes, and there it goes. Same thing with the calendar. I'm not going to show you that because it can take a bit of a time. But at the bottom right, you can see that just sank. And this is going to push my ACT contacts that were specified here over to Outlook. I know that is fast, but that's an overview of the feature. And my goal here is to cover a bunch of stuff. So let's hope that finishes, and let me go on to our next one. Okay, purging data. There's some built-in stuff and there's some add-on stuff. So purge data, why would I want to do that? Number one, most people are of the opinion that you're going to fill up ACT. And so if you attach all your emails and fill out lots of fields and put lots of notes and lots of histories, you're going to fill up ACT and make it slow. That really is not the case since they moved to a SQL version of ACT in 2005. So, but it is possible. I've got a group that, we've had groups that have 30, 40 people in at once, and I've got a call center that makes, hundreds of calls a day, and their database gets slow just because of the sheer mass amount of data. But I'll tell you, most people, smaller offices, individual users, there's no way you're ever going to fill up ACT or impact the performance of ACT. And so it's not really necessary for you there. However, you may want to purge old data. So I'm at the point, I've been using my database for 18 years, and it's gotten a little bigger, it's got a little bloated, and there's just frankly people that I know are either gone or aren't going to work with me any, they're just gone. So let me show you a few different ways to look for things inside of ACT. Okay, so this is the category of purging data. I'll save that one for later. Okay, here we go. Okay, so purging data, there's a couple things you can do. One under the lookup menu, contact activity. And so I can look for contacts that have changed or not changed since. And so let's say, this works better in a big database, but let's say I have, I want to find anything that's been changed this year. Okay, set that to changed, set that to January, and I want to look at contact fields, notes, histories, activities, and that's going to show for me anything that's been changed. The other way, if I want to find people that haven't been touched, it's the opposite query. Look up contact activity, not changed since the first, and you get another subset there. So if your goal is to, hey, I want to take off contacts that haven't been touched since 2010, you can do it that way. Now keep in mind, edit date is a field that it looks for, and so if you've done a mail merge or a big mail blast, that probably could show up there. But you can look for people that don't have a history or don't have a note in a particular period of time and get them out that way. So that's one way of doing it. Okay, the next thing under the Tools menu is Database Maintenance and Remove Old Data. So this lets me be a little bit more precise. So for example, the folks that have a call center and they're making hundreds of calls a day, they might want to take histories out that are older than 5 years. Cleared activities, so once an activity is cleared, it becomes a history. And so you'll see startup time of an ACT database impacted by lots of histories. And so sometimes people will delete these, but document tab entries that are older than a particular amount of time. So this is some ways you can clean up things. Now we have add-ons for ACT that really don't cost a lot of money that can be more precise. So for example, you see history's older than so many days, but what if I just want to take off system histories? System histories are things when accesses are changed or lookup or field histories have changed or anything that the system says. And for most folks, those are nice to see, but they really tend to clutter up the history. If I just wanted to do those, I would need to either use a special tool or a trick I'm going to show you right now. I don't have a way to say, just show me system histories and delete them, but I can go and create a group. And I can create a group that has all of my records in it. So here's one I already made called All Contacts. You can see the criteria for being in this group is the contact field contains data, or it's not equal to blank. Another way to do it is contact field contains data, but basically it tells me that all of my contacts are in this group. Okay, then I can go to history, and inside of history, see, I've got some different things here. I've got to-dos, I've got meeting held. I don't see any system histories, but you'll get the picture here in a second. Let's say emails. I want to get rid of emails sent. Under types, see, I could say I just want to see system histories. See if there are any. There's a few. So if I just want to delete system histories, I don't need that add-on. I can just go right here, and I can select these, and I can delete them. Now there is a preference inside of ACT under Tools and Preferences that basically says histories cannot be deleted. You'd have to turn that off before you do that. If you want to go and delete just email histories, you can go, okay, let's find email, just email histories. And so then you can do, go and delete those. This is a really good way to kind of see what's going on amongst a portion of a group. Now, another way we have is the history list, and this came up a couple versions ago. So in the history list, I can also go and say, well, let me just look at email history. So I'll change this to none, set that to email. If there's any there, they'll show up. Oh, last 30 days, there's not. I'll change it to all dates. So I can be a little bit more precise here. So if you want to delete all the email history, you can do that. Now this view is also really helpful if I'm trying to see, is my email integration working? Okay, if I set this so I can see email histories and set this to today, that's going to show me the histories that have gone out with email attachments today. And so if this is blank and you've sent a bunch of emails, your email integration is broken. All right, Chuck, I'm not sure what you mean by your question. I'll come back and answer that at the end. You mean your database is locked or mine? Tell me what you mean by that. Database, well, I'll just address it. Let me skip to our next one here. So database locked means that somebody has gone into tools to find fields and locked it. You can either unlock a database if you're in it. You can unlock it by going to the tools menu, and you can go down to database maintenance, and you can choose lock, unlock database. And that basically kicks everybody out, so they can't do anything. And then if ACT is closed and you get in and you get a message that says, hey, your database is locked, what are you going to do about it? You can actually go, let me see if I can start it up, into ACT Diag and go to database. So here you see all your databases, or you will. And you see right here, this column is locked. So if a database is locked, you'll see locked in this column, and you can actually right-click on this and choose unlock down at the bottom, and that will also unlock it. So sometimes databases get locked because an administrator is doing work in it, and sometimes databases get locked because it broke or SQL didn't start. If you don't have an option for it, you're probably not an administrator. So make sure that you're logged in as administrator, and you can probably see it that way, or do it with ACT Diag. But non-administrative users don't have access to that. In fact, you'd see that you have other things grayed out, like defined fields and other things if you're not an administrator. All right, so the next thing on my list is advanced lookups. I'm making pretty good time. I hope you're getting something out of this. Let's see if we can go to that. Advanced lookups aren't really helpful without normal lookups, but I'll just kind of skip right over to that. So one of the things about advanced lookups, they're under the lookup menu and down here's advanced. Let's just look at some of these things. So starting at by example, annual events, contact activity, and advanced. Let's just kind of overview some of these. Now we already talked about contact activity. So that contact activity lets me see which records have had things done to them. So if I want to see which records have had a note put into them this week, maybe I'm trying to tell my team that we really shouldn't be doing notes. So I can say, let's say since the 21st, I want to see anything that has a note in it. And as you recall, I put a note in from Melissa saying that we liked barbecue. Let's see if it shows up. And there we go. So here we see a note here from Melissa, loves barbecue. So that's hey Chuck, I'll take some time and answer your questions in just a bit. That's how you see, if you're trying to eliminate notes from being entered because people have been doing those and treating it as a journal, you could look them up that way and identify who they are. Another thing under this is annual events. So let's say I wanted to know everybody whose birthday is coming up in March or February. Look up annual events, and I can say, so there's two types of fields for dates inside of ACT. There's a date field, and then there's an annual event field. If it's an annual event field, we use that for things like birthdays, anniversaries, renewal dates, and things like that. So let's say it's your job to send out birthday cards once a month. Now you could do alarms that basically fire when their birthday's coming up, but a better way is to basically use the birth date field and then just look up. So let's say it's my job to send birthday cards. Let's choose current month instead of February because it's easier. But we would just put something on their task list that says once a month send birthday cards, and so that person would log in. They do look up annual events, search for birth date and the current month. You hit find now, and there's everybody that has a birth date. And I'll hit the create lookup button, and you'll see that I am telling the truth. Under personal info, see their birthday is the current month. So this is different than a date field. If I had a date field, I would use that for things like start date of a project or things like that, where I'm going to look up or follow-up date, things that are going to happen in the next 30 days or things that happen within the last 30 days. This is looking at items that have the same month and date, but not the same year. And so in this case, I had 6 people. I can do my labels. Let me show you how to do labels real quick. File menu, print, labels. It's always better to pick every style that you already have. And you hit print, and it's going to ask you if you want the current lookup. So current lookup, wake up. There we go. It's hiding down at the bottom. So all these boxes, anytime you run a report, it's going to ask you, do you want to do the current contact, a current lookup, or all contacts? Current lookup is just the group that I've just looked up. And so now when I hit print, I got hang up down there. I hit print too many times. There we go. So there's my labels for my current lookup, just the 6 people that I want. So it's always important to do the lookup of something rather than the whole database. Okay, other things on advanced lookups. Let's say I wanted to have I want to find everything is in my territory. And my territory means ID status equals to prospects and state equals to California, New York, and Texas. Now you could right click, look up state, NY for New York, click OK. There's all the people from New York, 70 or 26 of them. Then I would right click, look up state, California, and I'm going to add to my lookup. So that means show me not only the people from, where did I choose first? New York, but also show me the ones from California. That's what add to lookup means. It means take the one I started with and add to it, please. And then I'm going to choose Texas. Right click, look up state, TX for Texas, add to lookup. And now I've got everybody from California, New York, or Texas. But let's say I just want to see the ones that are customers. Well, I want to, I keep that in my ID status fields. Let's add my ID status field to the list here. I go to options, customize columns, find ID status, click add it, move it up. I can imagine if I'm going fast, you'll want to listen to the recording, so I'll put it up on YouTube and send it to you. But here's ID status, and so I want to find everybody that is from California, New York, or Texas who is also a customer. So I go back to my lookup, which I previously did, which is the 65 people that are from California or from Texas, and I want to go to the ID status field, right click, choose lookup, say customer, and I want to narrow my lookup. So how I have, what do I have? 12 people that are from New York, California, or Texas who are also a customer. Okay, so you can do it that way. It takes a few steps, but let's do it one more. Let's do it with advanced lookups. So this time I go to lookup, advanced, and advanced query. And in this case, you can go, okay, let's do the state field. State equals to Texas, add to list. State equals to New York. Oops, watch that. Add to list. State. California, add to list. So I'm doing my query. Now be careful because I just said I need everybody that is from New York and California and Texas, which they don't exist. So I want to change and to an or. Now this will show me, and I can preview to see it, the folks that are either from California or New York or Texas, and there's 65 of them. If I want to add to this the people that are from ID status equals to customer, ID status contains, select customer here, add to list, and so now if you read this, remember your algebra, okay? I'm looking for everybody from Texas or New York or California who's a customer, and I don't want that. I want to put a parentheses here. So it's going to first find people from one of these three states and meet the criteria of customer. And if I hit preview here, you'll see there are 12. Now, if this is the way you do it, you can also hit the save button. And I can call this my territory. And that way you can get to it later. Another kind of cool thing you can do with this is you can open this as a group. So let's say I wanted to go run it again. Where's my mouse? Hold on. I wanted to go run it again, I would go back to lookup, advanced query, and you can open it, and there you'll see it, and it fills it all out. Or you can go to groups, and I can make a group called My Territory, group, new group, and in this case, my criteria, add remove contacts, is going to be that advanced query. Okay, so in this case, I just would go to edit, go open that thing up. There's my advanced query, and look, it fills it all out for me. It does, there it is. Okay, so now the criteria for my group is that lookup. And so as soon as anybody, let's say Lance Parker, moves from California to Florida, when I go back to groups, Lance is gone from that group because he does not meet the criteria anymore. So that's an advanced query. All right, let's go to the next one. I told you this is fast. All right, which I just showed you dynamic groups. So let me just go back and reintroduce dynamic groups. So dynamic groups, there's two types of groups inside of ACT. There's dynamic and static. Dynamic groups are there because they meet a criteria. So in this case, the group called My Territory is a dynamic group where the condition to be in that group is they must be either California or Texas or New York, and they must be a customer. So if I wanted to have a group of all customers, you see here, ID status contains the word customer. If I'm a customer, I'm in the group. So here's Andy. If Andy is no longer a customer and now is a consultant, Andy falls off the group. Okay, so that's what a dynamic group is. They're based upon a criteria, and basically you make a new group, you go to add or move, and you can select the criteria just like we did in the advanced lookup. Now a static group is when I get there. So a good static group might be for your Christmas card list. Let's say we go to lookup, all contacts, and you go, okay, I'm going to send Christmas cards this year to these guys. Click, 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 click. Okay? And I want to save these as a group because I just decided these guys got Christmas cards this year. Step one, look up the selected. And step two, lookup menu, groups, save lookup as group. Now I'm going to call this my Christmas card list. As soon as you save that, it's going to populate with the people that you selected. Now when I go to add and remove contacts, you see that they're up at the top as static members. See, static members. So I want to remove somebody now. I have to go up here, select Ernest Anderson, and take him out. But that's good where they didn't really meet a criteria, but I just want them to be in a group. Like, who did I send Christmas cards to? So every year we go look at last year's group of who we sent cards to, and we start from that. That's what the use of a static group is and a dynamic group. CopyMove Data. This is helpful if I have two records and I would like to move between the two. Watch this. Let's just say I have Juliet and Jonathan. Lookup selected. And on Jonathan, I'm going to say current decision maker. So I'll just go to notes, insert a note. Current decision maker. Now there's a few ways to get that over to the other person's contact record. So there's Juliet. Now here's one. So number one, you see Jonathan has it on there and Juliet does not. Now there's another way to go and put the same note on both records. You go to the list view, you select them both, and you hit insert note. And I just put in note to both of them. See up at the top, the contact record is both of there. And it'll do the same thing for history. So what you saw I just did is I made a note and a history that goes to both places. So here's history. There's both history on the first person, and there's both history on the second person. Same thing with the note. Note to both of them on the first of them, note to both of them on the second one. So that's a way to, if you had a bunch of people that went to the same marketing event or the same trade show or something, you can record the same history or the same note across multiple contacts just by selecting them from the contact list and then entering the note or the history. The other thing I was meant to get here with CopyMove Data, that's under the Tools menu, and here under CopyMove Data. And so this lets me select two records like you see here, and you can copy information across, like let's say the phone number. You copy it from one to the other. See how when I copied that, if I go down and want the zip code or the email address, watch that. So as soon as I hit the button, it copies the email address from one to the other, or the birth date you can copy from one to the other. So that's kind of nice. Let's say you've got some fields that need to be copied over so they're the same in both places, you can do that way. And then the last thing you can do is you can move notes from one to the other. So when I'm done, if I did it right, see, I actually moved the note over. It didn't copy it over. So there's an option for copy and move on that. So not a feature you use all the time, but it's kind of handy. It's kind of cool that it's there. It's CopyMove Data. Sales opportunities. Let me give you a little bit overview on sales opportunities. So ACT is a contact-centric database, and for most part, we work with contacts or people, and we work with companies, or we work with opportunities. And so I might work with, at a particular company, I might have 5 contacts I work with, and between those 5 contacts, there might be 5 or 10 different sales opportunities or deals. And so we've got different places. We've got the company view here, where I can see the different companies that I have and the people that are there. So, under CH Holding or CH Imports or CH Tech, you see I've got these different folks that work at CH Tech. I can play leapfrog between Sarah and go back to the company view, and Alice or Chris, and go back to the company view, and Juliet. So I'm able to drill into the contacts that are here just by going between the company view and the contact view. Now, sales opportunities are your deals. And so if I've been, working with CH Tech 1, and all of a sudden I go, hey, here's Sarah, and Sarah says, hey, I want you to quote me on this deal. All I've got to do, I can either go to the Opportunities tab, or I can go to the New menu and choose Opportunity or Control F11, and I can make a new opportunity. And because I started with a contact, it's going to fill out Sarah at the beginning. So I'll just call this Big Factory Deal. In this case, I can mark the sales process, the stage where we are, the reason if they have it. If you want to put pricing, you have to go to the Products tab, which is right here, and you can add one, either pick from a drop-down or type it in yourself, and that puts in the product. And then when you save it, you can now play leapfrog between the contact. So I can go from contact or opportunity to contact to company. At the company view, I can go to opportunities. There's my big factory deal there. I can go back to contacts, back to opportunities. So you see on more complex selling situations where you might want to work between contacts and companies and opportunities, you can do that. And the thing to think about is as you fill out information or use buckets, you're going to put company information at the company level, contact information at the contact level, opportunity information at the opportunity level. Now, the only thing to be aware of with this is that when you do go to mail merge, it's going to mail merge from the contact fields only. It's not going to mail merge from opportunities and contact fields. If you do a lot with opportunities, we use and recommend a product called QuoteWorks, which basically puts opportunities on steroids. And I'll do a webinar. In fact, my next webinar is actually ACT and QuoteWorks together. So if you do a lot of quoting, come listen to that one, and I'll tell you about it. All right, that was sales opportunities, a little bit shorter. And next one is the preferences screen. And I'm just going to give you an overview of preferences. And we're going to take a few questions. So preferences under the tools menu and preferences. Now they have, over the years, they have started to move some of the preference storage locations into the database structure, which means they sync. But let me just kind of go over some of these things. So if you've been getting a notification on yours right off the top that says, hey, there's a new product available for you, and you don't want to do this, or you're in a group that you shouldn't do this without others, you can turn this off. Here's ACT announcements. Here's custom messaging. So maybe I wanted to tell you in a message when you logged in that we're going to upgrade ACT this Friday and to be aware of it. So that's just messaging. It's very simple. It's not chat, but it's kind of nice to see. Okay, under the General tab, if you're working multinationally, you might want to have the country code in your phone fields, or you can turn that off. For quoting, you can have it prompt you for a quote number, or you can just leave it off. Again, I use QuoteWorks for most things. The next one here is default database locations. The interesting one below here is salutation. So salutation is you know, let's say, you know, what's when you go to fill out a contact, it decides what the salutation is. So Mr. Tim or Mr. Frosting, you have different choices there. Gosh, you probably never need to change that unless you're in certain industries. So, you know, maybe you're in London and everyone has a title that starts with Your Highness. You could add Your Highness as an option there and go that way. Colors and fonts. I would say be careful of this, and but each of your different lists and entities, you can put grid lines, you can change the colors, you can make them bold, you can make it italicized. Whatever meets your needs, but there's kind of a limit. So if you change your font up to a 15 or something, although that'd be great on your eyes, it's probably not going to read well. So be careful in that. The other thing that people do is they use the Windows. Watch this. So as our monitors get more and more resolution, they'll go in and right-click on the window, and they'll go to Display Settings, and they'll kick this up as high as possible, or they'll scale the font. And the problem with that is that it may not look good in ACT. So, you know, here's change the text size with scaling, or the resolution can be changed. So all of those things can have a factor in changing things. This isn't a real popular feature, but you can do it. There's different color schemes you can choose from. Calendar activities, this one's helpful. One thing I do with this one, let's say I want to have to-dos default to timeless. This defines when my day starts. So if I work the night shift, I can have it go overnight instead of during the day. I can define working hours and work days. And this one defines, so let's say to-dos should always be timeless, and they are here. So with a call, I'm going to schedule that. I'm going to put it on my calendar. With a to-do, I'm going to do it sometime today. In fact, I actually keep my calls timeless and leave my meetings scheduled. Down below here, automatically display drop-downs. If you have these checked, as you go through a scheduled activity or calendar item, these will pop up and make it real easy to just tab right through it. Other options for making activities public or private, separate activities for scheduling. Interesting stuff, but that's under the activities section. We already went through email and Outlook setup, so I won't go back with that, but here's where I can set up email history preferences or Outlook contact and calendar sync preferences. The top half is for email preferences, the bottom half is for calendar and sync preferences. Under communication, this is an interesting one. If you use Microsoft Word, you should set this to Microsoft Word. Otherwise, you're using the ACT word processor. Fax software, nobody's really faxing anymore, but here you could choose that. Dialer, golly, as much as I'd like to say that works great, it's old. It doesn't work great. Startup, we can choose what our view is. So we want to start up to the welcome view or the contact view. If we want to specify a database. If you use Teams or security, you can define what level security access a record has by using record creation options. So for example, I can default my new records to public, or I can default them to private, or I can default them to just my security team. So that's how that works. All right, next, admin. Notes editing, history editing. You can turn off the ability to edit notes and history. You can choose to allow files to be edited. You can customize. Here's where you might add your highness as a salutation or a prefix. Company preferences, duplicate checking. You can specify what makes a duplicate and have it flag that when you need to. All right, I am done with that. Let's take a second and I'll go try to look through these questions here. I'm going to go ahead and stop my recording.